Hello everybody and welcome to the Learning Technologies event here in London Excel Arena. Today we have a very special guest with us. We have Michelle Ockers. So Michelle is a learning and development specialist and published L&D author as well. Michelle, welcome. Thank you very much for joining us. It's great to see you.
And it's great to be here, obviously not local, all the way from Australia.
Fantastic, fantastic. So tell us a bit about yourself then and what you do in the world of L&D.
So I work with L&D leaders and teams to increase the business value and impact of what they do. And a lot of that work is through stepping back and thinking through strategically what does their business need and how do they work in ways that deliver greatest business value, which also happens to be kind of the topic looking at practices and principles to drive business value of the book called the L&D Leader, which I co-wrote with Laura Overton that came out last year.
Fantastic, fantastic. So what was the vision? Because I believe you're the founder of Learning Uncut, is that correct?
That's right.
Super, super. So tell us, how did all that come about?
So I started my working life more on the business side than on the learning side. I was actually in the Air Force, so more working in logistics operations, but always with something that always struck me was that relationship between business and business activity and learning, and how sometimes we missed that. And I was always curious and got a kick out of helping people to develop and grow. So when I left the Air Force, I started working more in that learning space, but always coming at it from what does the business really need and how can learning be truly relevant. And I just found that whilst my thinking was not necessarily unique because I hadn't come from a learning background, I wasn't burdened by thinking learning first. I could come at things business first and think, well, what's the business problem we're trying to solve? What's the business performance we're trying to achieve here? Yeah. So I found that my thinking added value in a different way when I worked with learning teams and when I led learning teams. So I just kind of leaned into that. And eventually decided it was time for me to step outside of corporate roles because I wanted to work with more organisations with those ideas. I wanted to accelerate my own learning because we learn so much through our work, right? Yeah. And to spread some of those ideas more rapidly across my network. So I ended up founding my own business to focus on that.
Excellent, excellent. Have you found there's been a massive impact from the work that you're doing with those organisations that you're looking at?
The organisations I've worked with and continue to work with over the long term, the ones who are attracted to the work I do are the ones who are ready for their work to have a bigger impact in the business and are ready to step back and take a little time to work through their strategy and really getting close to their stakeholders and understanding what's going on in the business, what the workplace actually looks like and feels like for their people, because it does take a little bit to step back and do that thinking rather than just race to producing courses all the time. So where they're willing to put the work in with us, yeah, they make shifts.
Excellent, excellent. So what brought you here today to the Learning Technologies event?
Well, in part, it's because I was invited to run a session utilising the book. And, my co-author, Laura Overton, lives here in London. I live in Australia, so we haven't been together, seen each other face-to-face for 3 years while we've been writing the book. So it was a great opportunity to connect. I've got a very big network. I got into L&D pure at a time when Twitter was in its heyday, and it was an amazing place back in sort of 2012 through to maybe 2016 to meet, to network. It was an incredible learning platform in itself through the people you could connect with.
Absolutely.
And so I have a big network of people here to connect with. And I just want to tap into, things are changing so fast at the moment. Obviously AI is driving a lot of that right now. So I wanted to tap into what's happening over here, what are organisations doing, what are people finding works, doesn't work. So it's part of my professional development too.
Yeah, fantastic, fantastic. So you were invited here to do a talk tomorrow, weren't you?
That's right.
So without giving too much away, what can people expect and why should they, make sure that they're in the room with you?
They can expect an experience of using the fundamental principles from the book which Laura and I co-wrote, which is heavily evidence-informed by a 20-year L&D benchmark, to help them to make sense of what they've heard at the conference, to pick something that's going to help them to create business value back in the organisation, and to identify what they're going to do to act on that. So it's really a sense-making activity, but an experience of using the principles from the book and putting them into action.
Fantastic. So when you work with organisations, you help them build, high-impact L&D functions. So where do you find most businesses are kind of going wrong or need a bit more guidance with the learning that they offer?
Having an impact in L&D starts with one fundamental shift or increase in your impact, and that's really getting clear with your business on what the improvement in performance is. What's the business strategy? What are the business goals? What is a good outcome for learning and development going to look like, rather than just jumping at courses and delivering courses and thinking that's the silver bullet and that's going to automatically lead to an improvement in performance. So a lot of the work I do is on that tuning in piece, if you like, is what Laura and I call it in the book, and really understanding in a really grounded way the workplace context, the business strategy, who your people are as workers, as learners, what matters to them, and bringing that together to look at what is it we need to be helping them to do better, and how do we work with them to do that.
So talking of the book that yourself and Laura have put together, I believe it was built on 20 years worth of research with input from over 10,000 different L&D professionals. I mean, what inspired you both to start that process and write that book?
So
fantastic.
I've got the book here, the L&D Leader. So Laura founded a benchmark over 20 years ago. It was called the Towards Maturity Health Check at the time.
Right.
It's moved on. It's now known as the Learning Performance Benchmark. But she was really curious as to what it was that the top performing learning and development teams were doing differently, those that were having the most impact on business performance, on agility, on building culture. What was it they're doing differently? So there was 20 years worth of evidence there to draw upon. But what we noticed, I kind of met her on Twitter and we started collaborating. I was using the benchmark in my work, and what we noticed was all of the knowledge was out there, but there was this knowledge doing gap. There was plenty of information about what learning and development teams needed to do to create impact, but so few of them were actually doing it. So we got curious then about, well, what is it that's different about the ones who are doing it? And we came across during the pandemic, actually, with some research we were doing, that a lot of it is around mindset.
Right.
And the way we see ourselves as learning and development professionals, the way we see our role, the way I see our relationship with others. I've also been running a podcast, the Learning Uncut podcast, which is case study based. I talk to an L&D person in each episode about a project, a solution. So there was these two bodies of research that we had, and we thought, we're going through tremendous pace of change now, and that's not going away. We live in a world of continuous changing where our old maps don't serve us well anymore. Mm-hmm. It's no longer a matter of, well, if you follow this framework or if you use this design model, you're going to create impact. So each of us needs to be equipped in learning and development with the wherewithal to read the environment that we're in and to create our own pathways forward. So that's the need we wanted to fill with the book. It's not a set of process steps, it's a set of principles you can apply to figure out where should we be heading with our business in conjunction with others, and how do we respond effectively to that based on learning science and the smart use of technology, and how can we be continuously improving that, and how do we need to show up to do that?
Fantastic.
So that was our inspiration.
Yes. Quite inspiring, absolutely. So in the podcast that you mentioned and the book itself, I mean, you talk about L&D leaders, moving away from being the expert with all the answers and moving more towards being a navigator. I mean, what do you think, or why do you think, that change is so necessary? And why do people actually need to make that transition?
I think the change is necessary because our old maps are no longer relevant. Yeah. Because change is coming at us so fast. We have less time to develop courses, to develop programs, to know what the next skill is that we need to be able to build. So we need to figure out how to work differently in our own context and what's going to work in our context, and to be continuously adapting. We've got this beautiful metaphor we use in the book from the Polynesian Voyaging Society, who originally set up 50 years ago, the 1970s, in Hawaii. There were a couple of people of Hawaiian descent who were really curious about how was it that without any instruments, without any maps, our ancient ancestors were able to navigate 2,500 miles from Hawaii to Tahiti and land in Tahiti.
Yes,
and we've lost those ancient navigation skills. So the analogy there is, as L&D leaders, when the environment is shifting around us and where our old maps and our old ways of working, particularly in light of AI at the moment, aren't necessarily going to work in today's environment to deliver value, how can we build the skills to be able to read and sense where we are, where we're going with our stakeholders, and to move forward and create our own paths?
Fantastic, fantastic. You also talk about smart, bold leadership. So for anyone who hasn't read the book yet, what does that actually mean in practice?
This is about our internal compass. This is about our own mindset. Some of the things I spoke about earlier about how we see ourselves, how we see our relationship with others in our work, how we see risk and innovation. So the acronym that we've derived, and it has been derived, I know it sounds a bit cute, but it's been derived from a lot of analysis of different interviews that we've done of those L&D leaders. What is it to make that's different about them? About the way they show up, the way they think, their internal compass. And it's the BOLD, the bold, is being business oriented, being open-minded, so continuous curiosity, what can I learn here, what can I explore, who can I explore with, leading and learning, and being deliberate and intentional in our practice, running targeted experiments, testing and learning things, figuring out where we are now, what's going to get closer to where we need to be.
Fantastic. So a bit more of a broader question. So what does continuing professional development mean to you personally?
I equate it very much with continuous learning. So on an ongoing basis, how do we make sure our skills are relevant, that we're equipped to do the job that's immediately in front of us, and that we're ready for change that's coming up. And each of us as individuals has, no one's going to do that for us. We're the director, yes, we're in control. True. So how do we take charge of that, figure out what we need to learn in the moment and into the future, and continuously be engaging in a process of development that keeps us relevant and useful with our work.
Completely agree. So what makes professional development truly effective in your opinion?
That's an interesting one. What makes professional development truly effective?
Yeah.
I can answer it maybe in terms of what makes how do I approach that as an individual rather than from an organisational context, because I believe each of us as individuals needs to own our own continuous professional development, that we can put ourselves into situations that are supportive of that. But for me, it's around I do it through community often. So there's a sense making. What skills do I need to develop? Partly that's through my work. What do I need to be able to do right now for my work, for the next project? Do I have all the skills I need? Do I need to build more skills? What does that look like? How am I going to do that as I work and through my work? As well as through my network, through going to maybe webinars, professional associations, industry events like this, understanding what's changing, what direction is work heading, what direction is my profession heading, and what do I need to, perhaps more slower time, be upskilling myself in to be able to work in that world.
Fantastic. So with the work that you do and the organisations that you work alongside and with, what do you find is possibly the biggest misconception about continuing professional development?
Some of the organisations I work with are in organisations where there is a regulatory requirement for CPD. So yes. Particularly health organisations, for instance, for clinicians, there are regulatory requirements, certain CPD points they need to get through professional associations. Yeah. But I think one of the misnomers is that CPD is that's the only reason to do CPD. That if you don't have a regulatory requirement or a license you have to maintain, CPD isn't relevant.
Exactly what we see on a regular basis, I have to admit. Okay, so what do you think the role of accreditation has in the world of CPD and in terms of the quality of the training that's being delivered?
I think for the individual, and I'll come back to the quality of training or the quality of learning, I'm going to flip it and say learning. I tend to talk about learning rather than training. Accreditation is a demonstration to the external world that I have these skills, I've maintained these skills. So if you are looking for new job opportunities, project opportunities, it demonstrates your skill. It's a way of benchmarking your own skills for you, so it helps you to understand where am I actually at with my skills, particularly where some of that CPD is portfolio based through the work I've been doing, and someone else is looking at that work and saying, yes, it meets it meets the quality standard, or here's some gaps that you might need to fill. So it's a good way of benchmarking.
Absolutely.
And I think in terms of what does it mean for the quality of learning, let me frame it in terms of a professional association that I did some work with 2 years ago to help them. I led a community-based initiative through their members to develop a capability framework for them, and now they're looking at hanging a CPD model associated with that, and it's not where a regulatory requirement is required, but it is a way of really for them to be looking at the quality of the learning that they're offering their members. Does it, and if we are going to be granting CPD, particularly for activities other than courses, what's the standard it needs to meet? So often for CPD you'll find there's some sort of skills framework or capability framework that sits alongside it, so it can lead to a higher quality and much better aligned set of development activities than in the absence of something like that kind of framework and a system of sometimes it's peer-reviewed CPD, right, for the accreditation. Sometimes it's reviewed by an independent expert, but it's a way of a set of eyes looking over it and ensuring that whatever the learning is, it meets quality requirements. So it lifts the quality of learning.
Absolutely, totally agree. I mean, we have our accredited framework in place just for that exact reason, to make sure that quality standard for the learning and the training is there all the way throughout everything that we work with. Okay, so finally, Michelle, where do you think the landscape in the modern day of learning and training is heading?
That is such a good question, and I'm at the conference and sitting in on different sessions, and there is a lot of navel-gazing is not the right word, I don't want to say that, but hypothesising about the possible futures of learning and development. Where is it heading, particularly with the advent of artificial intelligence?
Absolutely.
Learning is no longer about a content play. It's about practice and application. It truly, I think, with the support of AI, we can truly get more work happening in the workflow. So I think everyone's grappling with that. We're no longer a content creator. Into the future, we may no longer even be course providers.
Absolutely.
We might become sort of orchestrators of experiments. As people learn together through experimenting with new things, with ways of working. Connectors, connecting people to learning opportunities through their work, connecting people to other people that they can learn from and through and with, helping people to have better conversation. So I think whatever the future of learning looks like, it's going to be less about learning and development staff being actively engaged in the middle of the learning process and more about this idea of orchestrating and facilitating opportunities for learning to be happening and for performance to be improving as a result of it. But there's so many possible ways that we might be able to do that into the future. It's quite exciting.
It is. It's an exciting landscape, isn't it?
Yeah,
absolutely.
it is.
Absolutely. Well, Michelle, thank you very, very much indeed for joining us today. It's been a pleasure to talk to you. And if you want to find out a little bit more about Michelle, get the book. All right? And I'm sure in the book you'll be able to see the world of what the L&D landscape looks like for Michelle and her co-author, Laura
Overton. Or just connect with me on LinkedIn, Michelle Ockers. I'm easy to find. And
Super.
I'm always open to answering questions, having a conversation, exploring things together. Continuous learning.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, Michelle.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, everybody. And join us for the next episode. Bye-bye.